get started. First thing I want to mention actually is that this webinar is being recorded. You might have gotten that message as you signed in to audio. So if you have to leave early or anything like that, you can always come back to the recording. That usually does take a little bit for us to get up on our website, 3 to 4 weeks, so it won't be immediately available. But if you do want to return to the recording, check out our website. All right, so without further ado, and for the final time, I want to welcome you all to the Take Control of Your Time webinar. This is a presentation of the New York State and CSCA Partnership for Education and Training. My name is Jess Rossman, and I'll be your host for the webinar, and our instructor today will be Donna St. John. We also have Heather Romano on the call. She's going to be our tech backup, and she's also taking attendance, so you get credit for being here today. I just want to take another moment to point out a few things, some housekeeping. First, you've all been muted to keep background noise to a minimum. So if you have any questions or comments, you can type them in the chat box as we go along. Now you can find the chat panel at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, and I see a lot of you have already found it, but if you haven't opened it yet, click on the chat button at the bottom right. That will open the chat panel above it. And then once it's open, just make sure that everyone is selected in that Send To area. Type your thoughts in the box below it. And when you're ready, press Enter to send it in to the chat panel. Lastly, we are going to be participating in several activities throughout today's webinar. And if you've taken our webinars before, you're really familiar with it. But I do just want to make sure that everyone knows where the raise hand button is. So that's at the bottom of the participants panel. I'm sorry, it's at the bottom of your screen by the reactions or smiley face button. So go ahead and click that just so that I know you know where it is. And when you do that, like many of you already have, you can see that a hand goes up next to your name in the participants panel. And we'll use that to participate in some activities, and we'll also use it, you can use it to ask questions. So feel free to use both of those options. You can put your hand down by clicking on that button again, that raise hand button, and it should disappear. Excellent. All right, moving on. So as I mentioned previously, today's webinar is sponsored by the New York State and CSCA Partnership for Education and Training, or as many people refer to us, just the partnership. Some of you may be wondering, what is the partnership exactly? And for those of you who aren't as familiar with us, the partnership is an organization that administers education and training programs for CSCA represented employees through labor management cooperation. It's funded through negotiated agreements between New York State and CSCA. Typically, the partnership offers in-person classroom training, online learning, educational advisement services, grants, tuition benefits, labor management services, and other education and training programs, including the webinar you're attending today. So in essence, the partnership is a joint labor management organization whose mission is to promote career mobility, improve job skills, support workplace safety and health, and promote effective labor management relations. You can learn more about us on our website or by calling us directly, and don't worry, I will be providing this contact info again at the end of today's webinar. All right, so now that we all know a bit more about the partnership and about you all, let's get started with the Take Control of Your Time webinar. I'm going to turn the presentation over to your instructor, Donna.
All right, thanks so much, Jessica. Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Donna St. John. A little bit about myself. I'm actually a retired New York State employee. I worked in HR and in multiple HRs and training units. So I don't know exactly what your job is, but I do feel your pain when it comes to trying to control your time, right? So I also want to start by saying we all do manage our time. Some things we do better than other things. And I know myself, I'm always looking for new ways to streamline my days. So I'm sure that if you're listening today, you want to learn how to control your time a little bit better as well and take control of those schedules. You know, one of the best ways to take back some of your control is to identify current obstacles. So let's address that head on. What's the biggest obstacle to taking control of your time? In other words, what gets in the way?
Please type your biggest obstacle in the chat box. Again, that's on the right-hand side of the screen. And just make sure that everyone is selected. We'll give you a moment to do that. Okay, let's see, I have interruptions, kids. Yes, that can definitely make it difficult. Just a lack of time, prioritizing tasks when everybody needs something. The order, so again, like the priority, the phone, that could be maybe both like notifications or if you're answering the phone as part of your job, that could definitely get in the way. Never enough time. I'm looking for themes here: procrastination or overthinking, urgency, ADHD, grad school work, unexpected things, and definitely overthinking. Yes, another vote for that. I think that's just about everybody here. Donna?
Great. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Yeah, as you can see, we all have things, obstacles that get in our way. And sometimes we just don't even know where to start, or it's just those day-to-day tasks or those short deadlines. Those are the things that don't give us much wiggle room uh, to control our own time, right? Some things that we have examples of are attending meetings, waiting on others, those distractions. You guys had said that. I don't know, even sometimes your task taking longer than expected. And I heard procrastination in there too. Absolutely, right? You could procrastinate on any given task, activity, or project. And a lot of times we're putting out fires, those urgent things. I heard that too. We're always constantly reacting to those time sensitive needs. As you can see, you're not alone in experiencing some of those obstacles. And some of the obstacles you can control, and there's others that you can't. And knowing the difference is first half of that battle. Second is to make the most of the time that you do have control over. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So it's no secret that one of the best ways to take control of your time is to stop wasting it. This is what's in your full control. Some of the common time wasters that we have are disorganization, lack of self discipline, leaving tasks unfinished, not asking for direction, socializing, and personal use of technology. Now, to help us evaluate our time management skills and determine if you struggle with any of these common time wasters, we've included a self assessment in the handouts. And this, as well as strategies for reducing your time wasters. You can use this assessment and identify areas that you need to pay most attention to. After this webinar, you'll have several tools to approach your time differently and to take control of it.
If you haven't viewed the handouts yet, you can always do so after the webinar. The handouts would have been sent as attachments to the email you received confirming your enrollment in the class. So check your inbox for an email from us. And if you can't find it, just let us know.
Great, thanks, Jessica. So now let's take a closer look at our objectives and the agenda for our hour. First, we're going to identify criteria for establishing priorities. Next, we'll have you consider techniques and tips for planning your time more effectively. And finally, work on being able to recognize and handle shifting and competing priorities. Throughout this webinar, we're going to focus on techniques that's going to help you take control of your time. And don't worry, while we plan to cover a lot of material today, much of it can be found in your handouts. And if you're looking for more information or details on this topic, you may be interested in taking the partnership's full day in-person course, The Organized Office Worker, the next time it's offered in your area. So first, let's talk about establishing priorities. Now, as we go through this section, I want you to keep the phrase time is money in mind. That means that time is just as valuable as money, and you should be very careful how you spend it. Both time and money are limited resources and often require us to establish priorities and planning and shift when things unexpectedly pop up. So I'm curious, how often do you begin your day by evaluating and prioritizing what you need to get done? This could be as simple as a to-do list or a post-it note or complex planning each hour of your day on your calendar. Now, do you guys do this? like to know, is it A, always, B, sometimes, C, rarely, or D, never?
I'd like everyone to notice I've opened the polling panel on the right-hand side of the screen. It may have closed your participant and chat panels for a moment. And you're going to take your mouse and click on the circle next to the option A, B, C, or D that best applies to you. How often are you starting your day by evaluating and prioritizing what needs to get done? Once you have made your choice, make sure you're clicking on send to actually submit it. And actually, it looks like almost everyone has already done that, Donna, so I can report out. If it's not appearing for you, you can use the chat box, just so you know. But it looks like almost everybody has participated, and I see some in the chat, and it's mostly B sometimes, Donna, with I always actually coming up not too far behind.
Nice. Nice to hear that. So thanks for sharing. And that's good to know because if you don't do this, we do recommend that you start, even if it's taking a few minutes in the morning to begin your day it's going to make a huge difference. Okay. So we all have a lot to do. So the best way to evaluate and prioritize is to know what obstacles, that when we're going to discuss that come up your way. So we're going to need some strategies and techniques to establish your priorities and to help us stick to them. So why do we bother setting priorities at all? Well, if we don't set priorities, we get the risk of getting distracted by unimportant tasks and not getting the most important things done. And there's going to be consequences if we don't complete the important tasks. Some consequences are small and some are not so small. When we establish priorities that help us to complete the most important tasks, we set ourselves up for success. In addition, we often feel a sense of relief. I know I do. So establishing priorities helps keep us on track and achieve the outcomes that are beneficial to everyone. Some examples are it gives us clear sense of direction. It leads to efficiency and productivity, improves our decision making, and by it narrows down our choices. It also reduces wasted time on reworks or unimportant tasks. Now, did I mention that setting priorities can also make us feel better? Right? But how? It might not be a universal experience, but I believe that most of us have experienced we've all spent time on things that you think are important, only to find out that it really wasn't that important and we should have been working on something else. I know that's happened to me. And it never feels good, does it? It can also end up being frustrated, make you frustrated. And few ways for establishing priorities that can make you feel better is it reduces our stress, right? By maximizing the time that we have on those important tasks, like we mentioned earlier. It reduces confusion when we make clear decisions on what tasks come first and second and so on. And it also gives us a greater sense of accomplishment, knowing we can tackle something that's an important task first. Now, here's a three-step strategy. So if you do everything, if you feel like everything's out of control, how do you actually set priorities, right? Well, first, you evaluate those priorities. Then you plan what's in your controllable time. And then you start to act on that plan by working on your priorities and also those limiting those distractions. Now, the first step, which includes all of the tasks that you do, and thinking about whether you have any control over them. So let's try this. Take a moment to think about your role and the work that you do, and using one or two words, what do you spend most of your time on? For example, mine would be going through emails or working on spreadsheets. Okay. Yours might be projects or customer service or answering phones or even paperwork. So, and when you do this, you can send more than one response.
I see some of you have already started. I love it. I'm going to just give a quick explanation for anybody who might not know what we're asking. So that polling panel is once again open. This one's slightly different. You're just going to send one or two words in the space that's available and then press send. And as said, you can send more than one. And then as your responses come in, what we're generating is actually a word cloud. So just in looking at this, it looks like emails, because it's bigger and bolder, has been sent more than one time, maybe several at this point. And then I'll just kind of call out some of the others. We've got research, meetings. If I were to type in here, which I can't, it would say webinars because I do these a lot. We've got customer service, spreadsheets, evaluations, scheduling, every time they move. I don't even want to do, oh, answering phones. We've got other tasks. Phones is in there actually twice, two different types, and same with email. So I think those are two of our really big ones, Donna. And let's see, data entry, organizing, filing. So yeah, I think we have a pretty good spread here. I can see that one more person is typing, which is cool. I've never seen that message before, so I want to let them enter that in. Looks like they may have, oh, spreadsheets and emails. So yes, spreadsheets, emails, and scheduling and organizing seem to be our really big ones here, Donna.
Wow, great. Thank you, everyone. And looks like that the things that you're responsible in the workplace, we can agree a lot on a lot of them. And it's no wonder that we're all looking for ways to control our time, right?
I skipped a slide, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's I'm looking. I'm
Really?
like, I was wondering if it was me. Great. So once you have all your tasks listed, and you're going to do that with your own tasks, right? What you're going to do, you should evaluate each one that comes your way with a common criteria. All right. How do you do that? You may want to consider things like how valuable or important is the task and your overall goal or the goal of the agency? What obstacles could affect your ability to work on this? How much time is it going to take? Okay. Does it have a deadline? How do you measure the progress or success? And then also, how will you know if you have to reevaluate? One challenge people describe as trying to take control of their time is the concept of firefighting. I think I saw that or heard that in there as well, right? The idea that urgent things pop up and are making that you feel impossible to get a hold of your priorities. But this happened. This is everything is urgent and important, isn't it? Sometimes everything comes in, it seems urgent. Well, that's where this is important. They take the Eisenhower principle comes in. Has anybody ever heard of this?
Go ahead and raise your virtual hand for us if you've heard of the Eisenhower principle, or maybe you just recognize the table or the matrix on the screen. Maybe you haven't heard that name, but you recognize it. There are actually a few hands raised. I would say five, it looks like, or six, Donna.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah, I had heard of it before. I didn't hear of it as the Eisenhower principle. But yes, I have been using this for years. This is awesome. Now, a little bit about it, if you haven't heard about it before, um, um, it's obviously named after Eisenhower, right? President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who leveraged this technique to manage time, um, so he could be more efficient and effective. We recognize that we spend so much time on things that we need to spend time on things that are important and not just urgent. So I want to take a quick look. You're going to look at that screen. Some things are important and urgent. Some things are just urgent. Some things are just important. And then there's also things, quadrant, where it's neither important or urgent. So what do we consider as urgent? Things are urgent are high priority. They're things that have to be dealt with right away. They're something that needs immediate attention. It could be deadline driven, highly visible. Some examples of urgent are safety issues, emergencies, pressing problems. Could be your boss calling or bringing you in for a meeting, or your school calling about your children. Urgent, well, and also think urgent and important. There is a quadrant for both of them. It could be your customer coming up to your desk or a phone call. Now you also want to decide, is it urgent and important, or just important? Important things have outcomes that lead to achieving goals, and it could be your goal or the goal of the agency. And they take planning. Could be things like future projects with future deadlines, preventative measures for your office, right? Or personal development, learning something new. What you want to make sure is if something falls in that urgent and important category, it's done first, right? Or it's delegated out to the expert. If it's something we want to get as many things out of that fires, right? Dealing with the fires, which is just urgent, into the important, where we can plan it. Okay. We can evaluate the priorities and try to plan it, schedule it. So, so a little bit on that. So now after this webinar, I want you to take a few minutes to apply that Eisenhower principle, right? Take your own things, line them up, and take a look at your tasks. Are they urgent? Are they not? Are they important? Are they both? And if they're neither, maybe you shouldn't be spending as much time on them. So does anybody have any questions on what we've talked about so far about prioritizing? And
Please type any questions you might have in the chat box, or feel free to click on that raise hand button. And I don't see questions, but while I wait for anybody to kind of type or raise their hand, Donna, I do see from Lori, she said use also with getting things done, which is 1, capture, 2, clarify, 3, organize, 4, reflect on, and 5, engage. Now I haven't heard of that before, but maybe you have, Donna.
um, I've heard similar things to that. That's interesting. But yes, getting things done, you want to find out what it is, clarify it, organize it, what do you need to deal with right away? And if there's some things in your head, you're writing it down. Can you do it in 2 minutes? Can you get it done, delegate it out, get it off your plate? Or some things take more planning and more organizing. So clarify, then you start organizing. Reflect on what you can give away, or what you can actually say, I don't need to do this at all. I can just discard this. And that is a great book. You're absolutely right.
Excellent. So I'm not seeing any other questions. Thank you for sharing that, Lori. Good book recommendation for all of us. I might give that a peek.
Yeah,
But I don't see any questions. So I'll move to the next slide for you, Donna.
great. Thank you. And I'll stick around for any questions afterwards, but we'll just keep moving through everything, right? So, all right. So far we've talked about obstacles that we encounter when we want to take control of our own time. And we've introduced the concept of the Eisenhower principle and the 4 quadrants of prioritizing and using a consistent criteria. So now let's explore strategies for planning your time. Now, as you've learned, to be effective and efficient, you must spend time on things that you identify as important and not just urgent. This requires the planning. Think of these important tasks as your big rocks, okay? And your big rocks must be planned first. Then you can sort through the gravel with the smaller stuff that fit around the most important activities or priorities. It might be a project that your boss gave you as the big, you have to deal with that. And all those little things like the emails and follow-up phone calls, that can fill in all the extras. So now that I've told you a bit about the technique for planning time, tell me, what techniques or approaches do you use to plan your time?
Let's use the chat box for this question and tell us about what techniques or approaches you use. We've heard one from Lori, which is excellent. So what are some things that you use to plan your time? All right, I see personal They start to come in quickly, and then I have to scroll. Personal daily agenda, a planner. I personally love a good planner. Lists. Let's see, a bulleted list. Maybe, ooh, Outlook. You can add tasks. Oh, I love to see that, Jean. I like to do that too. Let's see, a notebook, post-it notes, a calendar, of course, yes. Let me see if I see anything popping out, maybe a little bit different. Oh, from Matthew, the night or morning before a workday, I list out what tasks need to be done. So prioritizing before you
Yeah.
get stuck in the weeds. That's smart.
Well,
And sticky notes, yet again, another vote for reminders in Outlook.
I do. I love all these. And again, I love when everybody shares. These are great ideas. And I use a bunch of them as well. And if you see something on there you don't usually use, you could say, "Oh, maybe I'll try that." Right? I'm a big one for a planner. I write everything in my hard copy of my calendar is what I do. So great. So while it's true that you may not be in control of all of your work assignments that you do have some control over how you plan that time to get things done. Many times management problems can be solved by doing some planning and creative, reasonable to-do lists. And the key word here is reasonable. I think I get a kick out of this slide because I'm retired and that's actually my to-do list. Haha. So the key word is reasonable. For instance, you could turn around each Monday and look at the week ahead to see what deadlines you have coming up and might want to start doing your tasks there and writing things down that you're going to need to do to meet that deadline so you can have more relaxed Friday. And then you may want to figure out which tasks are important or urgent according to the Eisenhower principle. You could just mark all of your to-do list with a high, low, and medium, you know, uh, priorities. And I do like you could do the top three. You can write the top three as well. In any event, creating a to-do list around the most important task is a good first step in planning anything. But like most people, you have more than few things on your to-do list, okay? Than your time actually allows. I know that's how most of us are. It's nice to check them all off, but I don't think we hit all of them all the time, do we? Now, it's true that most people tend to underestimate the amount of time things take to complete, or the number of interruptions that actually we experience while we're trying to get things done. The lack of awareness allows people and urgent tasks to dictate our pace and our schedule. That's where a time log comes in handy. Okay. Helps you to figure out where you're wasting time or time wasters come in. And I think it's a good idea to put a little effort in the beginning to get something like this done. It's a simple tool. Okay. So we can't overstate its worth. So what you want to do is spend a few days or even a week tracking your time in various tasks and review your entries to see if you look for patterns. It's helpful to ask yourself things like, what types of activities did I spend most of my time on? What interruptions are getting in the way of my priorities? Could I have been more informed or had help? Would that have made me more productive? And which task could I have delegated or handed off to someone else? Now, once you have a better idea of how long certain tasks are going to take, you can really start to use your calendar to plan. When you have tasks that must be completed in the future or a big project that'll take weeks or months to complete, make sure you schedule a time on your calendar. Right? I like to work backwards myself, put the deadline on and how long I think things are going to take. And I do. I like to use my hard calendar and also my Outlook calendar. Now, use it consistently. One of the three techniques you can make a difference in your day-to-day experience. However, when you combine your to-do list and your time logs and your calendar, they're even more powerful. Now, if you're not using them all, pick one to start with and then add the other techniques once you feel like you've mastered them. Now, the next thing I want you to consider is called the peak productivity time. I'm curious how many of you heard about this?
Raise your virtual hand if you've heard of peak productivity times before. Ooh, this one's getting a quicker response. I don't know, can I see all the raised hands at once? Oh no, it's only showing me a few. Oh, Donna, I might have underestimated the last time we did this. There's probably more than half. I need to click the view all button. So there's more than half of the class has heard of this before.
Great. Great. And the peak productivity refers to, if you haven't heard of it, the time of day when you feel most energized and focused. You could also have heard it called used the circadian rhythm or your inner body clock. So it comes by different names as well. For some of you, this time, your peak productivity time could be early in the morning, or it could be in the afternoon, or even in the evening. But it's important. Knowing your peak productivity hours can be helpful when it comes to managing your own time. For example, if you know that you have a 2 hour window in the morning when you feel very low energy and lack of focus, you might try to schedule things that are less important tasks, or planning. Like maybe that's when I'm going to read through my email or do my filing, or start just putting my to-do list together, right? Later on, you might have more concentration, and that's when you want to schedule your harder activities, right? Things that are challenging or more complicated, right? And here's another tip too. If you have a big meeting coming up in the afternoon, don't eat a big lunch. Eat a light lunch, right? All right. So also think about it in the real world. It's important to note that not all of our jobs go with our peak productivity times. Am I right? And if this is the case, don't despair. You rely on all those other time management techniques to keep you going and keep your energy levels up, even if you're not at your peak. Now, here's another time management tool. It's called the Pomodoro technique. This method was developed in the 1980s by Francisco Cirillo. He used a kitchen timer, it was in the shape of a tomato, to break up his work into intervals and to take control of his own time. Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato, which is where the name comes from. Now, here's how it works: 6 steps, and I'm going to go through each one at a time. Step one is decide on the task that you want to work on. It could be a simple task or the first task to accomplishing a larger goal. Step two is set the timer, typically for 25 minutes. You can use a timer or an app on your phone or play a classical music piece that stops after 25 minutes. The key here is to set the timer. The significant research shows the importance of getting the clock and forgetting about the time is going to help you focus and get into the flow. Step three is to work on the task without interruption. I know for some of you it's not a realistic as your job requires you to answer phones or interact with customers, but even if that's the case, try to find time to give this technique a try. For those of you whom it's impossible, try limiting your distractions. That's the key. Things like silence notifications and reminders. Maybe use a do not disturb feature when possible. Now, remember, this is just for 25 minutes. You can always respond to any notification during the short break in between the Pomodoros. Now, step four is to stop work when the timer rings and take a short break, 5 to 10 minute break. You'll have a natural tendency that you want to keep working when the timer goes off, especially if you're already in the flow. But doing this ultimately hinders your focus and your productivity. Trust me, take the break, right? Step five is return to step two. Repeat the process until you complete 3 rounds. And step six, complete the fourth Pomodoro when you take a long break, at least 20 to 30 minutes. A full Pomodoro cycle takes 2.5 to 3 hours. Now, just imagine what you could get done in 2 to 3 hours of focused work, right? So, what do you think about this technique? Is the Pomodoro technique something that you would think you're willing to try? Let us know if you would use it, if it would benefit you at your job.
use the chat box, and I see there's already a couple of folks who have already done so, and let us know, is this something you would use? Let's see, some folks are saying they've never heard of it. Someone says, this sounds amazing, especially for ADHD brains. Got to try it, it's interesting. This is a technique that I actually do use. It does not work every day because not every day is the same. On those days where I do have a little bit more independence and I'm working by myself, I find this to be really helpful. And one of the things that people talk about most often is, wow, how do I take that 5 or 10 minute break or that 20-minute break at the end? And what I try to do is I structure it so that that 20 or 30-minute break at the end becomes my lunch. And then the other ones, honestly, I get up and I refill my water bottle and it feels like 5 minutes have gone by. Maybe I have a long walk to the water cooler, but who knows? But definitely, and I see some other folks while I was chatting that it can be useful for, oh, Michaela, for avoiding ocular migraines. You're not staring at the computer for hours on end. You're taking little mini breaks. It's good for your eyes. That's true.
Yes. Hmm.
And then let's see, personal life, maybe more appropriate for personal life, Lori says, and Maggie agrees that that's an option as well. Could be helpful for weekends, household tasks. Great.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, this is when I started doing this. This is the first time I heard about this. So this is great. I love finding new techniques to try out. As you can see, it's going to take a lot of time, but if you have a project that you have to work on and you have to be focused, it makes sure that you set aside the time. And another thing, and I think it's even in that book, Getting Things Done. I'm not sure because it was a while ago when I read it. Every time you stop and you lose focus, if you're looking at your phone or you're looking at your email or somebody come, all of those interruptions, you have to start all over again, don't you? You have to stop, refocus, and say, what was I working on? What was the sentence? Where was I in the spreadsheet? So giving yourself the time and saying, I'm going to set this time away. Maybe you're going to mark yourself off on your calendar so nobody plans meetings for you during this time so you can actually focus more and be productive. I think it's a great idea. Now, yes, not all of us have time to sit down and do this for multiple hours. Depends on the project, depends on your job. And I agree with use it in our personal life too, right? So great. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm so glad all of you guys are sharing. This is awesome. All right, now our final technique is a tool that I'm going to talk about technology, which this is a broad term, right? As we discussed earlier, it is a potential time waster. However, if you use it correctly, it's a great management of tool for time management. It all depends on what the intention is. Like for example, um, if if you're the type of person that you're going to pick up your phone and you're going to set a timer and then find yourself scrolling through social media, and you may not want to use it for something like that. But technology is not just limited to our phones. As state employees, we have access to a lot of product software, right? With Microsoft Office, and you can create tasks and reminders in Outlook. You can even, after you put everything on your calendar, you can print it out, right? And use that to plan all of your time. So if you haven't already, you can also check out all of the Microsoft Outlook webinar series. That's got some great information. Now, there's many useful apps also if you're not, maybe at home or something else. There's other things that are available on your mobile device. Some examples are it's called To-Do List or Rescue Me or Remember the Milk, Focus Booster, and Evernote. Another one, I think Jessica brought to my attention, Focus Keeper. So,
Yes, that's for Pomodoro. Yep.
yeah, yeah, talk to those techie people if you want more information on that, or they can help you work through those things. But Microsoft Office also has great. So I think we have another slide. What's your favorite technology?
Sorry.
I hope it's not
Yes.
Jessica's way of saying, come on, Donna.
No, no, no,
So
no.
what's your favorite technology helper? How does it help you? I'm curious, what are things that you guys use to help plan your time?
All right, as before, we're going to have you type in the chat box. What are your favorite technology helpers? I do recall from another activity that we had, Donna, that some folks were calling out that they use those Outlook features that you were talking about, use the reminders, use the flags for emails, things like that. A lot of folks are also calling out Google. Google is a great, they have their own set of productivity software too. Kim uses iCalendar, so like the iPhone version of that. Some other folks are using Outlook Calendar, maybe digital post-it notes. Those are fun. And folders and Outlook flags. So really keeping them organized in their email, it looks like.
Great. It looks like everybody's taking advantage of the Outlook. That's awesome, the calendars. So yeah, you could keep going on. Now, the important thing is no matter what tool you use, that you want to be comfortable with it. So, or even just, when you do have some downtime under your important quadrant, take some time to learn a little bit more about it, right? So you can become more efficient. The best tool uh, is the ones that you actually use, right? Now, does anybody have any questions before we move on?
As always, if you do have a question, feel free to type it in the chat box at any time. I am monitoring it, or you can click on the raise hand button. And now I say that, but I do have to just do a quick scan, Donna, to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Okay.
And I'll
I don't
certainly
see any
stay
question
afterwards if
marks.
anybody has any questions.
Absolutely, yes, we'll be here. So I don't see, Donna Conway. What was the list of different apps that you mentioned? I can type it in the chat if you'd like, Donna.
That'd be great. Then she can see it.
Okay.
Oh, that Donna. Yes,
Well, both Donnas actually, but yes,
that would
I'll
be
type
great.
that in the chat for you.
Okay,
And aside from that, I don't see any other questions, so I'll let you continue on,
great,
Donna.
great. Thank you. All right. So, handling disruptors, right? I imagine everyone here at some point has prioritized and planned and trying to get something done and completing, and something else of a high priority comes in and you need to handle it immediately. So you have to shift your demands and change those competing priorities. That's a reality of life, right? So, as much as we want to evaluate our priorities, right, and plan, taking control of our time only happens when we truly act. And that means limiting our distractions, right? And then we can become more efficiently. So we'll spend the rest of the time talking about how we handle those disruptors. And I'm curious, what types of things come up that require you to shift your priorities? Share some if you can think of them. I'm sure you can think of them.
All right, so apologies, I did not get all of those apps in, but I will in a moment. But essentially, we're going back to another activity here. So type your thoughts in the chat box about some things that come up for you in the workplace that require you to shift your priorities.
Yes, 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 I see them now.
Yes, meetings, definitely urgent requests from higher ups in the management space, supervisors, phone calls, absolutely. You've got your personal things like doctor appointments, family matters, project changes. Oh, those are my least favorite, but when the scope of the project changes, you kind of have to go with it. Yep, telephone calls. Oh, people walking up to my desk to socialize, right? And to have that culture in the office can be really important, but it can also be a distraction. All those urgent tasks, Donna, you were mentioning earlier with the Eisenhower matrix, the urgent but not important.
Yeah, when somebody said meeting before in our meetings, well, some of them we have to attend, but maybe some of them we can delegate somebody else to attend the meeting and report back to the group. So maybe we can save time that way, right? But it isn't quick meeting, come on back in, interrupts us, right? So, so many things on there, and definitely use the Eisenhower quadrants. Sorry, you were reading more. So,
Oh,
but
sorry.
no, you're there. It's so nice because there's so many people, but there's so many things they're adding, right? So let's talk a little bit. Let's try to touch base on all of them, but we all have those disruptors and how do we deal with them? So we're going to talk about the four most common reasons we shift priorities. So very common disruptor, and probably one of the one that we feel we have the least control over is those additional new priorities and tasks from supervisors. I see you guys touch base on that as well. So now they add, it's a new task that's added to our workload, and we have to shift our priorities on an already busy day or our to-do list. The best way to deal with this disruptor or a new priority task is to actually talk to your supervisor. It might be difficult at times to express that the new task or priority is too much to take on, uh, or that we're not sure if we can shuffle things. But it's important to talk to your supervisor. By reviewing the tasks is an opportunity to have a conversation with your supervisor. What can I do? Which one would you like me to do first? Shall I do both? Right? Can I delegate one out? This will help with your priorities and your workload. Your supervisor may not know what you have on your plate already. So it's a great opportunity to have this conversation. Maybe some deadlines can be pushed off or tasks can be pushed off as well. Interruptions are another common problem, right? You guys touch on a lot of those as well. So minimizing interruptions and handling them as they happen, this will help take your time back as well. Here's a few tips for dealing with interruptions. And keep in mind you have a lot in your handouts as well. So if you have an office door, you can shut the door. If you don't have a door, maybe get rid of the guest chairs or the candy jar that lures people into your work area, right? Or even sometimes just put a sign up, busy, mind at work, right? Sometimes people want to talk, right? Go visit in their area rather than, or you need to talk to someone or they want to talk. Go visit it in their area instead. This way, it's easier for you to get up and leave the conversation rather than having to get rid of somebody out of your workspace. Other things are just standing up, saying, I have to go, I have 3 minutes. Is there something I can help you with? Or can we take care of this late? Is there anything else? Or should I schedule time later? Usually somebody will wrap it up if it's something that's not that important. It's nothing with even just thank somebody for stopping by, kind of stops the conversation. So whatever you do, just make sure that you are respectful and polite to any of those interruptions. So, I know sometimes I was the interrupter. So taking a class like this reminded me that sometimes I was the one going into somebody's space and over talking or oversharing. Another thing you can do is you can say, I have to go to the restroom or begin walking away. Okay. Whatever you need to do to minimize the impact of the interruptions, just make sure you follow through.
These always make me chuckle too, Donna. I think I mentioned before because it's sort of like when you're talking about the candy jar that might lure people in, you're talking about like, I think of like a bird feeder luring birds in, but you don't want them to like sit and stay for too long. So you're like, oh, I'll get up with you. Let's go over here. Like, so that always
Yes.
makes me chuckle. But there are some really good tips in there that you gave.
Yes.
There is a question in the chat that I just wanted to, in a private message to me, so you can't see it, but Heather asked, what's your suggestion for when you need a supervisor's approval, but they're not available?
Well, one, what are the consequences if you can't get a hold of them? And it's kind of on a different level here. What's your deadline? Do you need to get it done by a certain time? The question that you might have, can you have a conversation with whoever's asking the question? When do you need this by? My supervisor's not available. What can you call them? Can you email them? Is there somebody else in charge? Who else can make that choice? Am I answering the question okay? Is there something I'm missing?
I think so. Heather, feel free to type in the chat and let us know if that helps.
Yeah.
She said,
You if they're
they're
not
not
there,
readily
you
available.
can't help if they're not there. But you're going to do everything you can and assure the person that you're trying to get the information for, or if it's for yourself or a deadline, that everybody knows that you're not throwing somebody under the gun, but here I'm waiting on this information. Sometimes it it's beyond our control.
Absolutely. And she says that, yes, we do all of the above. Just wondering if there was something that we were, anything that not doing to help the customer. Donna Conway also mentioned to email, things like that. Um, or Teams, Lori suggested. So we even have some of the participants
Great,
making some
great.
suggestions. So
Another thing is
excellent.
to let them know next time if it's something that happens more than once, to maybe let them know, hey, I need a way to get a hold of you if there's something urgent that comes up. Conversation, just communicate with your supervisor. Sometimes it's easier said than done, but it is the best way.
Excellent. So there is another question, but I'm actually going to hold it if that's okay, Tiffany, until we get through this next section. We just have a few slides left, and I see it's 10:50, so I just want to make sure Donna has an opportunity to get through the rest of the material, and but I have not forgotten you.
Great. Another one is dealing with for common disruptor is when you have to shift priorities and deadlines when you're working with other people, right? Sometimes that happens. You have a deadline, but something has to change. So when we're collaborating with coworkers or working with other teams, that's great. It delivers great results, but it can often leave us in the lurch, right? We don't necessarily get everything done when we want to, like we do when we work alone. But this also means that we depend on them, right? Because we depend on all those coworkers and the deadlines. So sometimes their priorities may not match up with yours. So project deadlines might be missed, whether it's a few hours or waiting for others. It does get frustrating. So how do you deal with these types of delays? Well, there's things we could do. We can establish expectations upfront together. We can check on progress time to time and shuffle priorities when necessary. And it's important to express appreciation for those handoffs and things that people do on time. We can offer feedback sometimes, that's helpful, and be genuine and curious about their work. We don't know what their deadlines, they might have to shift something else. Maybe they have interruptions that have come in. So be genuinely curious about their work and offer support if necessary. You're not trying to do their part, but you may offer some help with a task if it's appropriate. Now, the last disruptor that I want to talk about and mention earlier is procrastination. Okay. All right. Who in this room or this group has procrastinated before?
Raise those virtual
Yeah,
hands if you
mine's
have
up.
ever
Mine's up.
procrastinated. If I could, I would. But let's see. I have to view all. And again, we're past the two-thirds mark here for everybody in this webinar. It's pretty common, is what I guess is the answer here.
Right. Great. Yes. There's something. We always procrastinate about something. And why do we do it? Okay. It's a habit of putting things off maybe to the last minute. Okay. And it can become a big problem if we don't manage it, right? If we don't manage this issue. So if it's a minor thing, you want to think of why you're actually procrastinating. And if it's something big, we want to dig a little bit deeper. So the difference between procrastination and planned delay actions, though, sometimes there is a valid reason why we postpone taking immediate action. Waiting for to gather all of the information so we have the right things to move forward. Okay, that's a good thing. Or when conditions are just not right, maybe we're procrastinating for something for a little while. But on the other hand, if we're putting it off, sometimes procrastination is just an emotional element, right? And we need to address that to move on. Things like, for example, if you're overwhelmed, or you look at a to-do list, you're overwhelmed, you don't know where to start. Okay, you want to take that into consideration. Why are you procrastinating? And if you're overwhelmed, you may want to break things up into smaller groups. I know that always works. This is too much. So now let's break it up into smaller tasks and what I can take care of. Also, um, a good thing with procrastination, treat yourself after, if you don't want to do this job, I don't like doing it, I don't like doing the filing, I'm never going to get it done. Hey, when I get all the filing done, I'm going to treat myself to a cup of coffee, right? Or if it's overwhelming. Sometimes we have a fear of failure as well. So how do you handle that? Maybe talk to somebody that's the expert, get the help that you need, right? Maybe somebody else can help you to learn a little bit more or take a class. So next time you don't have such a problem with that. right? So just if you find yourself postponing tasks, it may be time to have a discussion with your supervisor. They may be able to help you reevaluate the tasks or the workload and prioritize and help you to recognize why you're postponing and if it's a valid reason or just if you're procrastinating as a habit. Now, whether changes you decide to make are a result of taking this webinar, one action that we do recommend is that you do stay in communication with your supervisor. So you want them to know what your workload is. They aren't necessarily sure. They don't do the work every day that you do. So they can help you shift your priorities or your workload when necessary. Now, you might even have to share a copy of your to-do list or your calendar with your supervisor. I remember I used to add them so they could look at my calendar at any time. So they knew what I was working on. And I was scheduling out my calendar with different projects that I was working on. Okay. And showing the tasks that you're focusing on and what activities are coming up, that's going to help them. So we do encourage that you do share your schedule with others in advance. That might actually help you plan around their projects or group projects as well. I did hear that thing. Teams, I think that's new since I retired.
Ah, yes, it replaced Skype for Business.
Great. So take a few minutes to review and wrap up. We're going to talk about we established our priorities using the criteria of the Eisenhower principle of what's important and what's urgent. And then next, we talked about several techniques that we use for planning your time, which includes to-do list and time logs and calendars, and maximizing your peak productivity time. And we talked about the Pomodoro technique, something new to use if you haven't used it already. You might want to try that out. And using technology like Outlook and smartphones. And finally, we talked about shifting those uh, competing why am I can't get this out, priorities, and those disruptors in those times, right? So does anybody have any questions so far?
If you do have a question, feel free to share it in the chat box. I do have two sort of ready for our question and answer period at the end here, though, Donna. So,
Great, great. Okay. Now we talked about a lot of ideas. So I'd like you to take a moment to think of of one of the most helpful things that you've learned today about taking control of your time. If you can share that in the chat box, that would be great.
so tell us about the most helpful thing you learned today. What are you going to take away from this class and use right away? Or what are you excited about coming out of this webinar? Go ahead and tell us in the chat box. Techniques to organize time. Take a time out and regroup. Great tip. Peak performance hours or peak peak productivity time. That's a difficult one to get out too. It's those P's, Donna. It's the P's. But really just like prioritizing the Pomodoro technique. Some great stuff. Eisenhower principle. Yeah, I think that's a really strong one and one that is very good for people to, if they haven't seen it before, to learn about. Use those reminders more, try that timer method. Maybe it's not exactly the Pomodoro technique, but using a timer can be motivating for you.
Yes.
All the techniques, great class. That's great. Thanks, Jean. Ah, Caitlin, that's a really good one to point out that other people have the same struggles that I do. Yeah, you're not alone, just as Donna said.
Yeah, and there's great information in this. And Jessica and I have talked before. We could talk about time management all day, probably.
Yes.
There's so many things that you could beneficial to you that you can look into that are in here and other books and other places. And even if you just Google time management, a ton of stuff comes up. The idea is to take those things and use them that are going to help you. But
Absolutely.
so uh, I don't. Let's see. So that's great. Um, Thanks for sharing, everybody. I'm so glad that you gave me a part of your day to talk about managing and taking control of